in tea, it happens in soft drinks, it happens in a lot of different things that you could have as a business. And so planning out what you think your market is, where you think your market might go, what happens if it goes way south. Always looking at a potential downside is something you have to look at, because anybody that's kind of fired up about a great new idea, you can blind yourself, right? So you can get blinded by how much you like your idea, and then you don't critically evaluate it in the early stages, and you can find yourself standing at the edge of a cliff. On the flip side, so seeking advice from outside parties who aren't quite as enamored with your idea is a really good idea.
What about, and maybe you can share it or not, the gas stuff that you're doing, where you buying these?
Yeah, so
converting it to electricity, because I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so we have it's one of the hard things in the waste business. Landfilling gets a lot of bad press. It gets kind of a bad rap. It's actually a very complicated, heavily engineered disposal system. You build these multiple redundant liners. You build protective measurement perimeters around it to measure groundwater. If there's any contamination, gets intercepted way before it harms anybody. You have all these procedures you have written. You have all these reporting requirements that you have to do. And so it gets a bad rap as being like the old city dump, when it's actually a very technical, highly engineered technique. Well, one of the things that people wanted to switch over to was burning it. Well, burning it, you're bringing waste in and you're dumping it in a pit and you're lighting it on fire and it's going out the smokestack. So they started doing burning it, and then the Clean Air Act came into place, and all of the cost of retrofitting the smokestack comes around and makes that particular way of getting rid of waste no longer economically viable. Started out, it was $40 a ton. When you put all that extra cost on it, it's $60, and it might not be the best thing. The benefit of that was, of course, you're generating electricity out of it. So here recently, because of the cost of fuel and the cost of generating electricity going up, it became viable to actually extract methane gas out of a landfill, run it through a generator, and generate electricity off of it. So 2 years ago, we designed our own power generation system, put it out on the side of our landfill. We're extracting 2,800 SCFM, that's cubic feet per minute of methane gas, which is the exact same chemistry basically as natural gas, running it through a generator and generating 8 megawatts of power. That landfill will run for another 30 years until it's full, and then generate electricity for 50 years after it's capped.
I think that's so cool. He told me about that a couple of years ago, and I was sitting there looking at it and I go, that is just so cool.
And so that's a perfect example of a already existing renewable energy technology that isn't being taken full advantage of simply because of the bad rap that landfills in general get. And in fact, what you have is a landfill is just like a big battery. You just built a giant battery out there in the ground, and at the end of that 80 years, the waste is completely broken down, the gas is completely extracted, and it's a dry tomb, and there's nothing harmful leaking out of it. So, and we generated, 80 years of, we'll generate 8 megawatts for the next 2 years. We'll add another generator. It'll go to 9.6 megawatts. We'll add another generator 3 years later. We could go as high as 12 generators. We're at 6. We're at 5 now.
In layman terms, would that be 10 houses for a year? Or how would I equate
8
that?
megawatts is about 6,000 houses.
6,000 houses a day. Just generating enough power for 6,000 houses a day. Wow.
Are you selling that back to the energy grid?
We drop it onto the Progress Energy grid under a contract with them.
Isn't that cool?
It is. And is the cost of producing the generators less than what you can bring in, making it economically sustainable?
It's a money-making proposition for us. Let's see, I can't tell you the price that they're paying us for the gas, but we decided that we wanted to do projects that were economically viable without incentives. So there are a number of tax incentives, grants, that type of thing you can go chase, and we're of course going to go chase them, but our business model is developed assuming we get none of those. And it's profitable with something like a 23% IRR.
So do you make more money per dollar off of that than you do the waste industries?
Well, the landfill itself is a 30% IRR investment.
Wow.
Hauling trucks running around collecting waste in neighborhoods is a 15 to 16% investment, if you don't make any mistakes.
Oh, wow.
Like messing up on a bid, you put a bid together, it's a very complicated formula, and you fill in the wrong number in your bid spec and turn it in, and you have to live with a contract that's losing money every day. And that happens, unfortunately, more often than it should in a sophisticated business. Yeah.
Can you contrast I know in Europe they do a lot of incineration and stuff, and they do cement kiln reprocessing to run power the cement kilns. How does that contrast with the methane gas extraction economically?
It's hard to make a comparison directly with the two. Most of the alternative technologies to landfilling work very well in very small quantities, and when you try to scale them up, the economics start to break down. So in Europe, they've made a lot of exceptions to some environmental rules that we have today here. For instance, when you take the stuff out of the bottom of an incinerator, the ash, in the United States, that has to go into a line subtitled the landfill. So even when you incinerate, you still have to have a landfill to carry the byproduct. Over in Europe, and specifically England, they have a big incinerator, and they take the ash out and they give it to the cement company next door, and they blend it in with their cement and put it on roadbeds and build house foundations and that type of stuff, without any regard with the heavy metals that are in the ash. So it's hard to make a comparison between how Europe does it and how we do it in that respect. And they do it on smaller scale.
So how big are these landfills? Because I was wondering, because if one landfill is going to supply electricity for 80 years of span, then I'm wondering that day by day there is so much garbage coming in, and you have to build lots of landfills if each has 80 years of period. Right.
So one of the things on a landfill that makes it economically viable is if you think of a landfill, a large landfill is 200 acres of actual landfill, and then you have probably 600 to 800 acres of buffering all around it where you can't build anything else. And a landfill is like stacking bricks up, right? So the larger your base, the more bricks you can stack, the taller you can stack them, and the more bricks you can get in a smaller impact on the ground. So a small city or a small town could put a landfill out and do it on 20 acres and generate 5 or 6 years of life, and then it's full. Or you could go to 200 acres and you've got 50 years of life, and you can handle 100 cities. So what North Carolina decided back in the early 90s was they wanted to go from 100 small landfills owned by cities and towns and counties and go to regional landfills. And so we have a regional landfill. A company called Republic Services has a regional landfill actually beside the Charlotte Motor Speedway. There are, I think, 4 other privately owned landfills in the state. And then there are 2 large authorities, which an authority is multiple government bodies put in one landfill and handle the region. And then there are still 35 little, county-owned landfills. So the little county-owned landfills don't ever reach a scale where power generation works on an economics basis. You really have to have a landfill about half of our size before you reach that point where the economics work. So we take in about 4,000 tons a day of waste. That represents, sorry, I'm trying to do the math in my head. There's about 9 million tons of solid waste a year in the state of North Carolina. And we do about 4,000 tons a day of that in our landfill. Wake County, right here where we are, Wake County we run their landfill for them. It's owned by the county, but we operate it for them. And it does about 1,800 tons per day. That represents almost all of the waste generated in Wake County and all the cities and towns in Wake County. So you look at the scale of these landfills, and you have to get to a point where you've got a landfill the size of Wake County's before it actually economically can generate power.
What's the difference or the benefits of running privately as compared to public?
You know, running a landfill privately, the benefit to private is that we as business people can sit across the table Wednesday afternoon with a customer and negotiate a price and shake hands and have an agreement. And a government can't do that. The government has to set a rate, applies to everybody, regardless of whether the customer is a good paying customer, or whether their safety programs are up to snuff, you know, all of those things. So privately run landfills generally have the ability to bring in more volume and have the economies of scale with the higher volume because they can negotiate those one-on-one price contracts. On the flip side, private companies are regulated more heavily than government bodies. So we have more inspections, more inspectors checking behind us than maybe the governmental landfills do. So we have more expense on the regulatory side as well.
Does it have any effect on the size of landfill you can create?
Most of the time, the landfills on the government side are limited based on politics and economics or engineering. You know, you try to build a landfill. Wake County, for instance, doesn't accept any waste from anywhere other than Wake County. They could be making a lot of money and still have plenty of life left and generate electricity if politically it would be acceptable for them to take out of county waste from other counties. But politically, they can't get the votes from citizens to allow them to do that.
What's stopping you guys from scaling to be as big as waste management?
Well, we're at about 450 million, and they are at about 12 billion. So we got a long ways to go. You know, we actually started our company. My dad started the company about the same time Waste Management started. They were a publicly traded company much earlier than we were, and they actually used their publicly traded stock to buy other companies. So they were able to acquire on a much larger scale than we were. So they basically grew through acquisition a lot more rapidly than we did. We don't necessarily want to be that big. We want to be better, not bigger. And we actually generate better profit margins than the larger companies do. Better return on investment than the larger companies do, and keeping the scale smaller where we're able to manage it and we're not growing just for the sake of growing. I know that's a hard concept really for me. I like the idea of grow faster, but in the CEO role, sometimes I have to ask my people to grow faster. Come on, guys, let's go. And sometimes I have to say, wait, slow down. You know, we need to evaluate this a little better. And as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to self-regulate. You know, you have to make sure you don't get too excited about your concept and not evaluate it fully. I've seen a number of instances where, you know, entrepreneurs had a great idea, they had a great amount of energy and passion for their business, and they didn't fully evaluate the what-if scenarios, and they got caught off guard and blindsided by something that ends up potentially being a fatal flaw in your business model. So you have to be able to sit back and be self-critical is one of the more important things.
And as I understand, to grow your business, there's very little organic. It's more of buying other companies. Is that kind of how that model works, or?
Yeah, you know, let's go back to like 2006. The economy's kind of moving along. Everything's going well. We're basically growing organically at the same speed as the market we're in, right? So if we're in Wake County, and Wake County's growing 3 or 4%, then we were growing 3 or 4%. We may grow a little faster, but generally speaking, you're just growing with the market. And then the way you expand your business and expand scale is to buy people. The other thing, so if I have 10 trucks running up and down the street and there's a